Spider-Man's rogues gallery is so good and so deep that Sony's hoping to build its own shared universe around it before Sony goes its own way with Spider-Man again. There's one more outing for the wall crawler in the MCU. Even 7 solo movies in the past 20 years. There's one iconic villain that Spider-Man has yet to fight, and the 3rd MCU Spider-Man movie is just the time to bring him out. It's time for Kraven the Hunter. Let's find out why. Spider-Man's rogue gallery is one of the best in all comics. The only other contender, Batman, has a colorful collection of ne'er-do-wells who have a revolving door at Arkham Asylum who hate the Caped Crusader for putting a damper on their shenanigans. But Peter Parker's rogues gallery can get a little more personal. The Green Goblin is his best friend's dad. The Lizard is his former mentor. His aunt works at the homeless shelter run by the flip side of Mr. Negative. Venom is upset that Peter rejected the symbiote and never got over it. Sure, some of Batman's villains are personal, like the district attorney turned 50-50 crime boss Two-Face. For Spider-Man though, personal is the rule, which, for as fun as they've been, have been a problem for Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Following 2 franchise attempts in a row, Marvel Studios made the agreeable decision to not retread villains that we've already seen, like the 2 versions of the Green Goblin. In Homecoming, we got the Vulture as the main villain, supported by the Tinkerer, Shocker, and the Prowler. In the second, Mysterio conjured up illusions of the Elementals to be a pretend hero. The problem? Both the Vulture and Mysterio's beef wasn't with Spider-Man. They were with Tony Stark, and he wasn't even alive by the second film. Peter Parker has been reduced to the role of president of the Iron Man fan club, stomping out the haters as they come up. While Toomes may now harbor a hatred for the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, Tony Stark was his first hate. It's high time Spider-Man faced a Spider-Man villain as a Spider-Man villain, not as an Iron Man hand-me-down. With personal villains like the Green Goblin and the Lizard in the vault, to use parent company Disney's terms, there's one villain that stands on the lion head vest above the rest: Kraven the Hunter. To the casual observer, Kraven the Hunter may seem like a second-tier villain, but he's the perfect combo breaker for Spider-Man in his 3rd outing at the MCU. What is Kraven's beef with Spider-Man? It's both simple and personal. In the comics, Spider-Man comes to Kraven's attention through his brother, Dmitry Smerdyakov, also known as the Chameleon. The Chameleon has his own difficulty stopping Spider-Man, and thought his mystically enhanced semi-immortal brother might help. Oh yeah, Kraven gets his strength from a mystic herb that also extends his life. More on that in a moment. Spider-Man proves harder to kill than either brother imagined, and Kraven is thwarted, which in his long life is not something he's used to. Kraven's whole goal in life is to be the greatest hunter that ever lived. To prove that, he kills his game the old-fashioned way, by jumping on it and stabbing it a lot. When he meets the man with spider powers, he knows that he's met the ultimate game, and joins the Spider-Man Haters Club. In fact, he could be considered a charter member of the Spider-Man Haters Club when they went official. Kraven is one of the original members of the team that hates the swing, the Sinister Six. His role in the Sinister Six hasn't gone unnoticed by the folks over at Sony. Back in 2018, Sony was trying to reimagine their Spider-Verse beyond Spider-Man. One of the things they hoped to do was give some of Spider-Man's top foes their own vehicle, since Spider-Man's sense of right and wrong tends to rub off on people, even on the bad guys who sometimes become anti-heroes, even if temporarily. One of those titles they were bandying about was Venom, which by 2018 was surprising Sony and critics alike by doing well at the box office. I know, right? So now there were 2 more Spider-Man frenemies that were on the list for the solo treatment. One of those was Kraven the Hunter. It was even assigned a screenwriter in Richard Wenk, who wrote The Equalizer 2. The other was Morbius the Living Vampire, which will be released this July. With Kraven as a solo act in limbo, he can get what the other Spider foes in Sony Spider-verse haven't: Spider-Man. Fortunately for Kraven, there's a window for him to enter the MCU pretty easily, almost like it was their plan all along. The biggest factor is that the man who introduced Spider-Man and Kraven is already in the MCU, even if he wasn't the chattiest person in the world. As Peter's class worked its way through Europe, with Nick Fury adjusting their itinerary along the way, one of Fury's men drove the bus. That man was Dmitry Smerdyakov. Sound familiar? Yeah, that's Sergei Kravenov's brother, otherwise known as the Chameleon. Of course, we didn't get to see his chameleon ways, and at best he seemed unimpressed by Spider-Man and Far From Home, but he could be more than a name drop. Smerdyakov is not going to be one of the people who buy into Quentin Beck's deception regarding Spider-Man, and who was behind the fake Elementals attack. But at the same time, Smerdyakov was driving the bus that Peter almost blew up testing out his new glasses. So still not the biggest Spider fan. Spider-Man faces a unique problem in his upcoming movie. Unlike Captain America, Iron Man, and the Hulk, all who have either shed their secret identity or never had one in the first place, Spider-Man was working hard on keeping his identity a secret. Even if MJ was around 60% sure Peter was Spider-Man. The cat went out of the bag when someone from Team Mysterio uploaded some altered footage to make Mysterio's crime Spider-Man's and to out Spider-Man as Peter Parker. Up until this point, the only one who knew Peter was Spider-Man outside of his immediate circle was Toombs, who kept his secret to himself for his own nefarious plans. That maybe involves Morbius? Oh, we'll have to find out in July. During Peter's problems with being doxxed by J. Jonah Jameson, Smirjikov might end up enlisting his brother to deal with the Spider-Man issue on his own. After all, Peter did try to blow him up on accident. We don't really know what Smirjikov's relationship with Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. is, other than he is, for the most part, unamused. We do know that things are not often what they seem when it comes to S.H.I.E.L.D. I mean, Nick Fury wasn't even Nick Fury, it was Talos. Talos was supposed to be finding out a new homeworld for the Skrulls with Captain Marvel until she got paged back to deal with the snap. Given the public nature of the outing, seeing as J. Jonah Jameson blasted it all over Times Square, it might just be that Smirjikov's brother comes hunting for Spider-Man all on his own. There is another element in Kraven's past that could play out in Spider-Man's future. That's his role as an Avenger. You heard me. In New Avengers, we found out that Kraven was part of the old Avengers, or Howling Commandos with a bit of a rebrand. They were assembled to track down super soldier serum stolen by who else? Nazis. The MCU Fury is not the Marvel Fury, not entirely. First of all, he hasn't been around as long. He only got the Avengers idea back in the 90s after a chance encounter with a space lady and her temperamental cat. The Howling Commandos do exist in the MCU though, but the last time we saw them, they were doing what Peggy says in the Agent Carter series. Not only that, but the MCU has been built around the super soldier serum and everyone's desire to get some of their own. There are some two options here for that. Kraven has the mystic elixir that he's been using to keep himself alive since the Russian Revolution and was involved in the Howling Commandos, and that's his connection to what's going on in Spider-Man's life, or there's room for another twist. Tony Stark wasn't Fury's first recruit for the Avengers Initiative. In fact, there might be a reason the folks on the shadowy screens are so suspicious of the Avengers Initiative. Fury's tried it once already, with an unstable hunter who's so extreme he hunts with his bare hands. Somewhere between Captain Marvel piecing out with the Skrulls and Tony Stark having a crisis of consciousness in a cave, Nick Fury might have employed the hunter unsuccessfully. Maybe he knows that his brother's still on the payroll, maybe he doesn't. Either way, that association places Kraven and Spider-Man on a collision path. The nature of the conflict isn't clear, except for Kraven's desire to beat Spider-Man and be the best hunter. But it would move Spider-Man away from the sort of Iron Man-light techno stories that he's been involved in, and involve him with a villain who, even if he has connections to Nick Fury, has a main beef with Peter Parker. There's another reason to want Kraven the Hunter, and that's because he's the center of one of the best Spider-Man stories ever written, Kraven's Last Hunt. Kraven's Last Hunt was a storyline published in 1987 that detailed a frustrated Kraven who wanted to settle things once and for all in a thoroughly final way. The plan involved Kraven putting Spider-Man in a coma and burying him alive, which for most villains would be the last step in their plan. Instead, Kraven assumed the role of Spider-Man. His goal was to prove he could be a better Spider-Man than Spider-Man, then die the greatest hunter ever. When the MCU has adopted stories from the comics, they have not been shy about taking liberties. Civil War was sparked by incidents involving the Avengers, not a reality show-based superhero team blowing up a city block. And in the comics, it never relied on Captain America's relationship with Bucky and Tony Stark. So with a great deal of liberties, they could use Kraven's Last Hunt as the basis for their Kraven story in the MCU. But a lot of the pathos would be lost with the relationship being brand new. Would Kraven's suicide carry as much weight when he was just introduced 2 hours ago for the audience? But the one element in Kraven's Last Hunt could also be the one thing that gets Peter out of his outing bind that Mysterio put him in. That, of course, is Kraven trying to be a better Spider-Man than Spider-Man. In the classic, someone else wears the suit while the hero is in his normal identity gambit, if Kraven goes about being Spider-Man while Peter Parker is out of commission, then the suspicion that Peter is Spider-Man might end up going away, providing his lawyer prevents Peter from being compelled to take a DNA test that shows he has powers. Is Matt Murdock busy? I hear he's good. More importantly, Kraven has to survive his first encounter with Spider-Man thanks to his role in the Sinister Six, and Sony's big desire to make a Sinister Six movie. What would suit the current and future plans best would be to save Kraven's Last Hunt as a storyline for late with Sony. If he ends up with dual citizenship in the Sonyverse and MCU like Toombs apparently does, then Kraven's Last Hunt might be an amazing capper on this iteration of Spider-Man for the big screen. However they do it, Kraven the Hunter is just what Spider-Man franchise needs to make Spider-Man about Spider-Man, and not about the one mentor he had that doesn't become a bad guy. That's why Kraven needs to be in the next Spider-Man movie. What do you think? Do you want to see Kraven's Last Hunt, or would you rather wait? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to CBR. Thanks for watching.